Howdy. We're back at Ed's Guitar Heaven. We're in my shop, my actual shop. It's not so cold in the garage today. And we're going to continue with this unknown brand, Parlor guitar. When we last left our hero, he was removing these braces and deciding about this one. He's going to keep this. Why? Because when I put this thing in this form and start to press down, I discover this sucker is absolutely flat. I don't need or want to remove this brace. This is going to get a new bracing pattern. I'm going to wait for the guitar to tell me what it wants, believe it or not, for braces. I have some things to propose to it. We'll deal with that later. Right now, we're going to deal with this strange phenomena of topology as applied to resetting the neck of a Parlor guitar. Basically, as I said before, if you lift up on this neck, it causes this area of the guitar basically to move in. Well, as this thing moves in, everything else has to be displaced. It's the science of surfaces or topology. Contemporary 3D CAD is immersed heavily in this, especially if you're designing sneakers or sports cars. My stuff is more mechanical, but I could do it if I wanted to. Anyway, when we left this, some residual at the very top is now left on here. Too bad for me. The glue didn't break where it was supposed to all the time. That's just life. So, in addition to that, glue has gotten, this is making the kerfing continuous. In effect, it's making the side of this guitar about 3/8 of an inch thick. Well, 3/8 of an inch thick wood doesn't want to be compliant enough to comply to the rules of topology. So I'm going to do two things. To get the top back on later on, the surface is going to have to be level. We need to take all this residual material off. Oh no, when we put the top back on, what are we going to do? We'll deal with that later. I don't know. And it won't matter. When the top goes on, it'll be seamless. Anyway, first I'm going to remove all the residual material. I've started doing that here. And after that, I'm doing that to expose these slots. And as I expose these slots, I'm going to cut all the glue and or anything else out, maybe residual pieces of wood, so that they can then flex. They're no longer presenting a unified chunk of wood up here, or even if it isn't that thick, hopefully to free up the movement of this. So for the next few minutes, and we'll watch a little bit of this, this is like a 60 grit sandpaper belt sandpaper that I got a roll of it, man, and it's the bomb for removing material in a hurry. One could use a rasp. I may have been known to do that. But you see this board is flat. This side is flat. And so I'm flattening this surface as to present it with a flattened top and ensure the glue sticks with it. For our purposes, more bending is going to happen here and less here, but I want it to be freed up, and we have to do this anyway. So what's going to happen is I'm going to sand on this until all this gray goes away, and the unadorned kerfing presents itself. And when that's done, we'll come back and watch me boringly cut the glue away between the kerfing to allow it to flex. We'll be back. Hi. Well, I've spent about 10 minutes with my rough sanding thing here. I've gone all the way around. We got one piece left here. I'm going to block your view while I remove this last little piece. Maybe. When I do this kind of work, I'm looking for anything and everything that happened to this guitar when it's made. And one of the things I see is as I'm doing this, I'm revealing a texture here that is not the grain of the wood, it's the grain of whatever went boom and flattened this thing just before the top went on. It's very interesting because the sand is very soft. It's like the pattern of a rasp. I'm constantly reverse building these things just because that's how I am. Now, as I said, there's glue in here that it got squeezed into the cracks in between the kerfing. The cracks are in the kerfing to let it conform to the curves as this goes around. They open up when they go around the outside and they close up when they go around the inside. Either way, if these aren't opened, they're going to impede the flexibility of this very top rim of the sides, otherwise known as rims. So I'm going to break the glue between each one to let it flex. Now I got this nice thin bladed saw. If I'm not careful, it's going to cut so thin that it won't flex enough. But I'm not asking it to do much, and it's a cute little saw that I hardly ever use. So we're not going to sit here and watch me cut all these grooves. In this process, many people take the top, they glue it back here, and get everything ready, and then honker on this thing back here, and then while it's distressed in this upward position, glue the rest of the back on, or a variation thereof. I do a variation thereof, where I don't want it to be stressed, but I do want this movement to be captured by the freshly glued back. It's the main way, just about the only way that I will reset a neck. In most cases, a major amount of warpage has happened here. In this case, it's flat as a bat. So I'm only going to use, but what we're doing here, if we're going by reverse time detective stuff, is that the actual warpage of the guitar that caused the neck to need to be reset was indeed this very thing that we're going to do to put it back where it started. There's no other indication. This joint is fine. This is flat. There's no warpage around the sound hole. It was made a little sketchy to begin with, probably a little ugly to begin with, but this is the very area that we're going to rewarp to get back to where it probably was when everything was where it was supposed to be. So anyway, I'm going to do the parts of lutherie that cause everybody to not do it, which is to do this boring stuff over and over again between each one of these cracks. I may change tools at any time. Now note here, I do not want to start sawing through the side. And that's the glue. The glue is probably a little harder than the wood. As I get close to the edge of the kerfing of the edge of this side wood, I'm going vertical to actually catch a part of the kerfing that was never cut before, but it's okay because it's glued to the side. My goal is flexibility. And we've determined that this is not bending very freely, and I can tell you, I can feel the difference already in having relieved these. Well, we're going to turn the camera off, and I'm going to spend a while chopping at these things and playing detective. Here's a V cut in. This V shows the center of this block, and it's about 1/16 of an inch off from the center of the neck, but this was a tooling process mark. The guitar detective is on the job. Okay, we'll be back when I've cut all these grooves and we start warping this to a more permanent position by using water. Okay, howdy. We're going to do a little short piece here before we either take a break or move on to the next thing. I found a much better tool. This is just a hobby hacksaw blade with a fairly wide kerf, and it cleans these spaces out much easier than the pull saw. So I've used it on the rest of these. There's one right here. I'll tell you that the hide glue is harder to saw through than the wood. Okay, anyway, there's some here I haven't done, but it's so far up front, we're probably not going to worry about it. There's two pieces of kerfing left on the back, and if it was gone or anything, I have kerfing. It's just two pieces. You glue it in there and level it. What I've done, which we'll illustrate again here, even though you may not be able to see it that well, is did cutting all these grooves in the glue and returning the kerfing to its segmented state help with deformation, and I will tell you that it definitely helped. We're getting a lot of, ooh, look at that, yeah. Well, I'm just testing what's going to happen next. We're going to have to restrain the entire top and get this pushed up in the air over a period of time to where it's 5/16 of an inch higher here than here, believe it or not. And that's going to take a while. And the way I'm going to do that is restrain this. I can restrain this in a number of ways. Usually I will put go bars, these bars that push down on the periphery, but I can't do that if I want it to move. I'll push some down here, maybe one here or two, fill this up with weight, and the weight will probably stop here. I'm just doing an experiment and seeing that when I hold this down, I'm getting a real good movement of all this part. And removing this material did improve the flexibility of this graphically, and it's going to help me in my process. So basically, the next time we see this, it's probably going to be restrained with some vertical clamping bars that go up. Maybe here, I'm not sure. A bunch of weight in here, including weight resting on this, and it's going to be in the form of bricks, most likely. And we're going to start lifting this up right here. Rather than extend this table for my measurements, I just have a piece of wood that's the same thickness. That's going to go under here, emulate the thickness of the table. And we want this end of the neck to be up 0.3125. I'll go for 1/4 of an inch. But what I'm going to try to do next is hold it up, get this wood to stay warped in that position. When I put the back on, hold this new position. If I do have to squeeze a little more out of it, I will, but we're lessening greatly the amount of work that this will have to do due to lifting this up. It's probably unable to do it. To aid my ability to bend this, I'm going to be spraying it with water. Now, in addition to spraying it with water, if I line this with some paper towels, and they kind of stick to it, it's going to keep the water in place. It's Arizona, the water just evaporates like crazy. I'm using water to straighten warped wood of this kind, especially tops, all the time. I've done it a couple, 20 times, and it's been successful every time. I've never had any water damage showing to the outside finish and things of that nature, but you do have to be careful and judicious. So that's about it. We're going to go through a setup where I probably put some paper towels on the inside, paying much more attention to what's going on here. We're happy with everything down here. I don't need to mess with it. And starting to raise this up. And after it's in that position for an hour or two, I'm going to come out and monitor. I'm going to make sure that it has enough water, and that if I push this up a little more, maybe it'll go up a little more. And over a period of a day or two, I'm hoping overnight, but this is a bad case. It may take me 2 evenings of this process to overcome about 100 years of where it was. And that's kind of miraculous in itself, that you can work with wood and make it do things of this nature. You can overcome the ravages of 100 years in 2 or 3 days, if you know what you're doing. Thank you very much, and we'll be back. Hi, we're back. This is a very sophisticated process. These are called graviton force developers. They look a lot like bricks, but believe me, these are graviton force developers. They work directly by the pull of gravity on them. The gravity of the earth is pulling down on these and causing them to duplicate the weight approximately, each one of these, of a regular looking brick. Being a luthier, I mean, I can't use those. These are, Stumac is going to start selling these a couple of weeks from now, the graviton brick. It's a revolution in lutherie. Otherwise, if you don't have any of those, you could probably use a regular brick. So what I've done is I've lined this, I've made sure the surface of this jig was unencumbered by sanding it off, making sure there's no high spots. Took the brush, brushed it off, put these paper towels on here so I don't hurt the top. Now there's paper towels on the inside of the tops of the bricks, don't hurt it. This sophisticated device is an internet receptor, and if I place it here, you can now pick up WUFO if it will remain. Come on, there, that's WUFO. If we keep it anyway, this is a thing to keep the brick from falling down. I mean the graviton unit from falling down. And anyway, this one's sitting on a brace. That brace is where I'm trying to limit the major force that I'm going to be putting on this here neck. Okay, we're spraying the paper towels in spray mode. We're spraying water dangerously into a 100-year-old, more or less. Notice that this is done haphazardly with no real thought. No, really, what's a person to do? We want the wood to kind of be damp enough to bend, but we don't want real water damage in the outside. I've done this dozens of times and never induced water damage to the unit. So we're in Arizona. If I come out here in 20 minutes, this whole thing's going to be dry, and I'll continue to hydrate it till I go to sleep. By that time, the sun will be coming up. And now we gotta start putting the bending force on here that we want. We're trying to deform this wood back to a reasonable place of where it was when it started life. Now when I lift this thing up, part of what's coming up is the back edge of the top, which means it's bending down if we look at it. In other words, there's a limit to how far I can raise this thing up reliably right now without doing some kind of damage. And I probably exceeded that with this block, but I'm not that far off either. We want all the combined weight here to start pushing this down so that the bending takes place here. And the only thing wrong with the spacer is it's actually, as the taper goes this way, it's pushing on this front instead of here. I just want a smaller one. We're going with that. We're inducing, it's lifting here a little bit, and that's just a part of everything that's going on. It may be that if I aided this maybe by pulling these in, that I could help, but I'm just letting it do what it do. The dampness is helping this stuff relax a little bit, and we've got a constant force here. We've restrained everything else, so there's nothing else for us to do but turn the camera off and come back in 3 or 4 weeks, and we'll come back in an hour or two and make sure this stuff stays hydrated, and check on it again very late in the evening, but we're not expecting any results until this thing spends at least overnight this way. And what I'm hoping is to see less and less force needed to get it in this position and maybe have it be amenable to being raised up about another 1/8. At that point, if we need another 1/8 or a 1/16, it'll happen when we put the back on. If I could just get that thing to be about where it is now by this time tomorrow, I'd be happy. Well, that's the nature of this particular repair. This is going to be the heart of the repair. Once this is done, we've turned the corner and we'll begin putting the guitar back to something that'll play if we're lucky. Okay, thank you.